Hi everybody, as it is Christmas or Christmas Eve this evening, I want to share a beautiful, compelling story. It's about how an act of kindness can generate an incredible ripple effect. And for that, I'd like to take you back to the spring of 1968 in Prague. And my father is a general practitioner at the time, and my mother is still finishing her studies for medicine as a guy comes to my dad and he's sick. And so my dad looks at him, he has a fever and everything, so he says, you need to stay in bed a couple of days and take these medications. This was a Dutch guy, and his name was Jan Bakker. He was in a tent. He was not there in a hotel or anything. So my dad goes, oh my God, you're in a tent. And he was there with his wife and his like 4-year-old daughter. And my dad says, but you cannot go back and sleep in a tent in this condition. And he looks at him, and really quickly scans him, and he thinks, you know what? Why don't you come stay with us, with me and my wife and my son, and you can sleep on the couch until you feel better. And that was a real act of kindness from my dad, because he didn't know the guy was a complete stranger, and yet he offered him shelter and a place to stay until he was feeling better. And Jan accepted, and so he went with my parents and he stayed there on the couch. And later on I spoke with Jan, and he said that he was really scared a little bit that he was going to be robbed. So he put all his papers and his wallet under his pillow and slept on top of his pillow all night, and but nothing happened. They didn't steal anything, so he was there for a couple of days, and my parents treated him very well. And after, let's say, some 3 days, my dad always has this test to pour somebody a glass of wine, and if they accept, then he said, yeah, I love that. He says, okay, you're better, man, you're feeling better. So he had another glass of wine, and they drank together, and they became really friends actually. And so instead of that the guy went back to sleep in his tent, his wife and his daughter came over to stay with my parents in this tiny little apartment that they had. But they stayed there the whole week. They talked with their hands and feet, but really hit it off, really became friends. And when they were leaving, he said, Jan said, what can I do back for you? It's so beautiful what you've done. You've been so hospitable, amazing. And my dad said, why don't you just send us an invite? If you send us an invite, we can get a visa to go to Western Europe, and then we might stop by, but at least we can go have a holiday in France. And so upon his return, Jan did just that. He sent an invite to my parents, and later on my parents got a visa. But they didn't plan anything yet. It was summer. It was August 20th and 21st, and that was the day that the Russians invaded into Prague. And suddenly there were tanks driving through Prague, and there were demonstrations. But in 2 days, they covered the whole Czech and Slovak Republic at the time. And my dad had a couple of whiskeys at night, and they were discussing like, okay, is this what we want? Do we want to stay here? Do we want to be suppressed? And so they decided the next day they were going to leave and leave the country. My brother at the time was staying with my grandparents in Bratislava, so they went all the way from Prague to Bratislava the next day to pick up my brother. They discussed it with my grandparents, and my grandparents went with them, to escort them to the border if anything went wrong or somebody needed to stay behind to get smuggled out of the country at a later stage or something. And my dad comes to the border, and he says, I'm Bulgarian, and gave some money. He said, I need to leave the country with my family, and waved him off, and he could just, they were gone. And then my mother later told me that she looked back through the back window. She saw her grandparents, really becoming small, and she really thought to herself, oh man, when am I ever going to see them again? Am I ever going to see them again? And so they arrived in Vienna, because Bratislava and Vienna is just 80 kilometers from each other. It was chaos. They were not the only ones who were fleeing the country, and there were Czechs everywhere. And my parents thought, okay, where can we go? Can we go to Germany, or where do we know somebody? And then suddenly my mom opted, why don't we give Jan a call, right? He invited us at the time, and so why don't we try him and call him. And Jan said, yes, you need to come over, you can stay with us, please come, we'll take care of you. And so my parents did, in their old Skoda, my 4-year-old brother, and and some little bit of money with them in a few suitcases. And so they arrived in Holland and they stayed with the family Bakker for a couple of months. And after they wanted to actually go to Canada, but their medical diplomas were not accepted there. They had to go back to university. And Jan said, why don't you stay here in Holland? It's a good country and we can help you. You can learn the language and we can maybe help you find a job. And then after 2-3 months, after they studied Dutch and everything, did their best, Jan went to the Rotterdam Academic Hospital and he said, I have 2 doctors at home, I need help, they need a job, what can you do for me? And he got an appointment for my dad with the professor of anesthesiology, and his name was Dick Keuskamp. And my dad comes and sit, opposite him, and they talk with their hands and feet, and my dad with his little Dutch that he learned. And the guy says, when can you start? And my dad really was like, wow, I don't hardly speak the language. And he said, no, it's important, you're a good guy, and your family needs to eat. In those days it was luckily still relatively easy to get a position in a hospital, but nonetheless, he didn't have to give it to my dad, and he did. And they became good friends. Our families became good friends, actually. We went on holidays and things together, so we became very good friends with, like the Keuskamps, like the Bakkers. And my parents were off. My mom got a job in the hospital as well, and my parents started their life abroad in a new country, and things started to go well over the course of time. But the thing is, had my dad not been so kind to Jan Bakker and offered him shelter in his own house on the couch, a complete stranger, then life would have been completely different. At least it would have been for me, because I would not have been here in this shape and form. My dad and my parents would never have gone to Holland probably. So you see what tremendous ripple effect a little act of kindness like that can have. And since it's Christmas, it's important to think about doing an act of kindness for anybody. For anybody. It doesn't matter how big that act of kindness is. You can see how it comes back to you, how the universe actually gives it back to you in multiples. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. A beautiful story of my dad. God, bless his soul. He's up there in the heavens. But I have tremendous respect for him. And he showed me what, an act of kindness, what beautiful effect that can have. So thank you all, and I wish you all a beautiful Christmas.